about, of course, investment in the services sector. And I will talk to you maybe under 4 headings quickly. I will just talk to you about the importance of services in economic growth. I'm sure that you have talked about that already this morning, so I will touch on it 1 or 2 ways why services are important. Then I will tell you maybe just, for example, small countries that have really developed their economies based on services, and then we will talk about what does that mean for Namibia, and then I can tell you maybe the role that we as NIPDB are playing. Of course, we know that nice quote there that says if you want to predict the future, the best way you can do is to invent it. And yes, inventing the future, whether it is with services, whether it is with anything else, if you're talking about economic growth, if you want to grow the economy, if you want to do anything, whatever we want to have, we need to make sure that we make it happen. So economy or services is one of the sectors that are very important for economic growth. They say that it has been proven that in more cases than not, services provide almost like a springboard for other sectors also to excel. And we will look at a few graphs because, as has been indicated, I'm an auditor by profession. Yes, I do write a few letters nowadays, but I enjoy more numbers and I enjoy graphs. I think it tells more of a story. And therefore, also it said that when you've got the presence of services, it actually increases economic growth and it increases the performance of other sectors. And we have looked at it. There was a study that was made that was done in Namibia, and that study looked at multiplier effect of various sectors. And you can see, let's see, I don't know if this one touches it. Okay, so if you look at some of these sectors like real estate, and what is the multiplier effect? So it means that this is, if you spend, let's say, $1 in terms of these services, this is the impact that it can have on growth, and this is the number of jobs that it can create. So that is the number of jobs that it can create. So you can see there 3.5 for real estate, market real estate and business services, other private sector services, health and so forth. Yes, there is communication and others, but sometimes the more complex the sectors is, of course, the more they need. And maybe real estate also does a lot because of construction that is involved. But then when you talk about construction, then you talk about engineers, then you talk about architects, then you talk about all the skills that are complex that you actually need in that sector. So services is something that is very important. And if you look at here, the component of services for many countries between the years 1980 to 2015, you can look at they said the developed world, that is how they've grown in terms of services. But you can see somewhere there is transition economy, but then there is developing, let's go somewhere there, developing Africa. You can see we are kind of lagging behind. So many other countries are growing and they are having services as making up the biggest component of the economy. Yes, we in Africa, we are also making progress, but probably not at a level where we should be. And therefore, there is definitely potential for growth in Africa in terms of services. I'm not going to dwell a lot on this other graph, but then you can also just see here the components. So if you look at it, for example, high income earners countries, most of their economy are actually based on services, while if you look at it, some of our countries, there is more that is actually based more on agriculture. So yes, it's not saying that agriculture is important, but maybe when you go to the next graph, you may see that yes, you can see there, agriculture has got quite a significant level of employment. However, if you look at the contribution to GDP, it's not necessarily equivalent. So which means, again, it's in Namibia, let's say about 60%, it's about 60% of Namibians are employed in agriculture. But if you look at the contribution of agriculture to GDP, it's relatively low. So services, you get a number of people that are employed in services, but then the contribution to GDP is high. And again, it's because of that level of productivity that is also one of the slides that you have there, that productivity and impact on economic growth in services is something that can be quite positive. So, if you want to grow the economy, you have to have know-how. So, Now it's not about the number of years you go to school. It's the number of years almost you spend in apprenticeship or you grow your skill. I'm sure that you have heard that if you want to become good at something, you need to spend at least 10,000 hours. So if you go through a profession like mine, I'm a chartered accountant. How do you become a chartered accountant? Yes, you study university about 4 years. After you study university, you start working. And when you start working, you must do 3 years of articles. And that 3 years of articles, normally I pay it to almost military service. So that if you really want to do something equivalent to military school, go to do it in your training. But then you must do it with somebody who's got passion to give you training. So some level of apprenticeship is like military service because you get trained. How do you become a chartered accountant? Because by the time you are done, you should be able to stand on your own as a professional. So that has to happen 3 years. They will never give you 3 years. If you tell them I'm working day and night, they tell you you must work 3 years because if you work day and night, you will not be productive. So yes, you do a number of hours because they believe it's only after you have done quite a number of hours can you become successful in that. And Ricardo says that is why many times your lawyer is not your dentist because of course then you first need to spend 10,000 hours as a lawyer, then you need to spend 10,000 hours as a dentist and so forth. And that's why then many times we stick to one trade. So it's not really about the number of years that you go to school, but about the number of years that you practice your trade. So first you start working in your trade and then you practice your trade until you are perfect at that one. And then what is the even more important there is the Scrabble theory of economic development. If you want to develop the economy, you need skills. And that skills, of course, is in services, and the more skills you have, the more things you can make. And he comes today, he said, the Scrabble. How many of you know Scrabble? The game Scrabble. You have played it, right? You wish you can pick your letters. Because the point is, look at this one. If they can give you more than 7 letters for Scrabble, you would love that. Because then you'll probably be able to make more words. So the more letters you have, the more words you can make. But then, of course, the more complex letters you can have, the more difficult it is to make words, but the better it is. So you normally want those X, Z, and other words that are bigger because they will enable you to do bigger things. And therefore, it's the same with skills. You want the skills that are high that will enable you to produce the more complex products because they'll be able to bring more. And many times, those skills are really, really in the areas of services. And when you do that skills in the area of services, they enable other sectors to proceed or other sectors to grow. So as a country, as Namibia, we want to see how many letters can we have, and we can leave that one. So what have smaller countries done? So we can look at examples of countries such as Mauritius. So Mauritius, they say, of course, the services contribute 68.5% of their GDP, and then you can see other sectors there. And they continue to grow their services sector. So their economy, they realize we are a small country. What you normally hear about Namibia is they tell you, if somebody is in manufacturing, they will be hesitant to come to Namibia, especially if their market is Namibia, because there is only so much you can sell to 2.5 million people. And therefore, if you look, for example, when people look at the competitiveness of countries, one of the items that they put there is about market size. Then they look at it and say, Namibia's market size is relatively small. Because Namibia's market size is relatively small, let's rather go somewhere else. But if it is services, of course, if you have got a good infrastructure, you will be able to, yes, export services, but you will also be able to export goods goods also as part of that. But then, countries such as Mauritius, they said, okay, let us start. It was easier to export services than it is to export goods. Let us start with services, and we have seen that the countries, like today, if you look at that one, the flow of FDI in Mauritius, those are the levels. You can look at countries that, like Singapore, they started with industrialization. They have mostly moved to services. If you go to Singapore, normally they say in Singapore, if you see a building, it's probably a hotel or it's probably a financial service mean for Namibia. So Namibia, we are now talking about diversification of our economy. So yes, Namibia, we have got services as one of our economies when it comes to GDP contribution. But when it comes to employment, services is not the top sector. So the services that we have, although it might be smaller in terms of employment compared to agriculture, it contributes more to the economy than agriculture does. So one thing that we are saying and looking at the opportunity really, we say that we have done what we call a diversification strategy. That is one thing that the government has done together with Harvard. And at this stage, they've focused on goods and looking at, yes, we have got renewable energy, food industry, chemical and basic, transport and logistics. But we're also talking about services, talking about digital services, talking about global businesses, and Namibia being a country that is really based in the region. And we can see there our strategic location. Yes, from a goods perspective, we can get to the rest of Africa. But also, if we are to establish ourselves as a logistic hub, it can be a logistic hub in terms of goods that come through there, but then also looking at our nice population and looking at everything else, we can be a logistic hub in terms of services. If Mauritius can be where they are and they serve many countries, then Namibia can also act as a service provider to the rest of the country. So support, of course, then there is infrastructure that is needed, especially in terms of ICT, and we believe that Namibia definitely is very well placed to act in that place. So what are the types of services that we are looking at? We're looking at, of course, business consulting. We have got some, but one can continue. You have seen that announcement being made by many companies nowadays that you can work from wherever. So we have heard that one thing that COVID has helped us to understand is that you don't need an office to work. You can work from home, so you hear the stories more and more of digital nomads. So if we are sitting in Namibia, a very nice and beautiful country, where people will want to come because they are safe, why not give opportunity to people who will have their jobs with Deloitte Africa or with PwC USA, because I'm mentioning those companies because I've read the two of them recently rated. PwC USA said, all 40,000 of our employees, we don't care where you work from. You can sit anywhere you want to sit in the world and deliver your work. And then we have heard also, Deloitte Africa said, you can sit anywhere you want in Africa and do your work. So as Namibia, that is definitely a great area of opportunity. So it means we can do business consulting for people that are working. I'm sure that if those companies have gone that route, others will do. And therefore, people that will come then to Namibia, it means that they will not even need our work. They just need to stay in Namibia and they can work for anywhere else in terms of the world. Therefore, we see opportunities in business consulting. We see opportunities of attracting what they call the digital nomads. Then, of course, IT. Nothing will be enabled if we do not have good IT infrastructure. We need good IT infrastructure. I think, yes, you might have noted this story that all of us are now used to. Can you hear me? Yes, we are dropping off the line and all that stories that we have. So we need to make sure that we have got reliable internet access so that we will be able to connect the world and will be able to attract the people. Because if we do not have that good, fast internet speed, then we will not be able to get the digital nomads. We need to be, if somebody wants to be in the desert and sit there and do the work, we need to have an ecosystem that supports them. Then, of course, marketing, virtual assistance, research services, and then your other traditional types of services. So yes, Namibia, that is where we are in terms of GDP. Our inequality is very high, so we need to work inequalities, and our inequalities are high when you look at what they say among groups, whether you're looking at as an overall country, or whether you're looking at even among groups. So if you look at among one group there or one group there, you can see inequalities are very high. And again, we believe that if we can grow sectors, those sectors have got a multiplier effect. With a multiplier effect, we'll be able to provide more jobs. This one here I want to show, because if you look at this one, this is Namibians that are employed. I will not go anywhere anymore without this graph. Namibians employed by 2018, close to 80%. If you move from this graph up to that are employed in Namibia, they are about 20%. We need to increase that number if we want to make sure that we provide services, because services require a higher level of skills. And again, whether it is vocational skills. The other thing is, if we want to deal with our inequalities that I told you is high, it looks like here, if you've got the postgraduate diploma, you earn high. If you have got no qualification, you earn low. So the higher your qualification, the higher your earnings. So we need to help our people improve their qualification, because when they improve their qualification, then they can improve their chances of earning a high income. Now the question is, why do we not have more employed people with a degree? Is it because our ecosystem is not able to produce those jobs, and therefore they are unemployed? Or is it because we don't have educated people? I will leave that question with you, because that is the only one. So we are saying that many people employed are with grade 12, then it's probably because we don't have sectors that will employ people with higher qualifications than grade 12. Or we don't have those people. Which one do you think it is?
It's a combination of both.
Is it a combination of both?
Yes. Because sometimes you have the capacity of the industry who's not able to absorb the new graduates that are coming.
Okay. So because of time, it looks like some of us saying which one and that. So think about it over the next few days and see what you need to do about it, because all of us must do something about it. So yes, with that employment again, the other thing that we have is a challenge that many people that we have of the employed Namibians, why are they having grade 12? Because most of our jobs are in the informal sector. So only few people are employed in the formal sector. And those ones that are employed in the formal sector, many of them are actually also employed by the public sector, which means our private sector is very, very little. And if we need services to be driven by the private sector, then we need to do a bit of work. And that's why when we come through, this is my last section, which saying this is where, as NIPDB, we say yes, Namibia, the president I think looked at this and he has heard from many people, we need to grow the economy. We are with economics, so I don't need to teach you economics 101. That is GDP. This one, Namibians are either unemployed, or they are earning low salary, or they are indebted, and therefore they cannot spend more. Government, we know the challenges with the budget deficit. COVID has just come to take away the few. Government cannot spend more to stimulate the economy. And therefore, if we want to stimulate this economy, we will not complain, we will not help. We need to do something here. We need private sector investment. And that private sector can be Namibian private sector, or it can be foreign private sector. So in services, yes, we are here to bring collaboration. We know that we've got a challenge because these rankings are not talking in our favor. This is the worst one in ease of doing business, and therefore NIPDB is here to help those that want to do services. Here it's more in letters what the investors and the stakeholders' perceptions are about what is happening, and therefore the president created NIPDB and said, NIPDB, I want you to help me do something. And we said, okay, for us to do something, this is what we are going to do. We are going to identify, develop, and assess investment projects for viability. So you can come to us with your project, and we will assess them for your viability and economic impact, including need for local and public sector participation. If we think that that project makes sense, then we will help you see how can we promote you to get investors for your project. And then, of course, if you also have got your own project, we can help you facilitate services for your own project. And then, policy reforms, branding Namibia as a preferred investment destination. We are here to coordinate MSME activities, and then we want, with those ones, we cannot do that without making sure that the skills that the investors are looking for are in the country. So we are also getting into the skills. Now, I know many Namibians ask themselves, the NIPDB is everywhere. What is their job? Well, their job is what is enabling the private sector to be in the economy. We need to be involved. And therefore, unfortunately, we have to be everywhere because the private sector plays roles in everywhere. They have a role to play in energy, they have a role to play in power, they have a role to play in wherever. So there is a long role to play for the private sector in many areas. And whenever they want services there, they will come to us. And interested in this project, and we will go and better. So our job is to go and search for investors for Namibia, from Namibia, and from outside Namibia. And so in doing that one, government will tell us when they want investors, and we will go look for investors. And then of course, if there are people that you have got your own project and you want government to issue license permits and so on, and it is taking longer than it should, you can knock on our door if you are one of our investors. We cannot just support everybody. So we will go through a registration process because unfortunately you do have to be at a certain threshold if you must work on the fact that there is limited resources. One day there will be such a big economy that will be able to employ 1,000 Namibians who will serve everybody. And actually the process will have worked so well that you don't even need somebody to facilitate the services for you. But for now, we know that there have been challenges and we are supposed to support government. So why do we exist? We exist to unlock potentials that will enable equality of life for all Namibians. We do that by facilitating trust relationships that will attract and retain sustainable investment for a private sector-led inclusive growth, and we behave by a real Namibian who leaves no one behind, who is accountable, making a difference, act with integrity, being brilliant in what they do, innovative and agile, and those are our objectives. Concluding remarks, we cannot do this if these things are not in place. So we work with Ghana to see how do we reform the policies. And then we say, how can we help Namibia improve the ease of doing business? And then we need to talk about one-stop center for saving investors. We need to look at how do we as a country respond to COVID. We need to make sure that we've got data-based decisions in which sectors to grow. We have to have a look at one goal, one approach for Namibia, which means if you don't have your support as private sector, it will be difficult. If you do not have the buy-in of the public sector and the participation, it will be difficult. If Namibians are complaining every day instead of supporting us, it will be difficult. So we need everybody on board because one is too small a number to achieve greatness. That is what John Maxwell says. Thank you very much. Again, if you look at the presentation I make, the more complex sometimes the product you have, the more you are able to get for that. So why do we many times say we want to add value to our project? So if you look at mining, for example, you go to mining, you take something from the ground. Normally you get paid a very little salary. But the moment you start polishing it and cutting it, you get a higher salary. And the higher you go in the chain, the more you get paid. So many times our investment in agriculture is really at that level that we are using the basic skills that where the lower salary is. And that's why we say that about 80% of our employed Namibians. And it's because many of them are employed in tourism and agriculture, and therefore they earn and they demand low salaries. So what happens? We produce maybe fruits, but then we don't make juice and dried fruit and others that may be able to draw more money. So in agriculture, then what do we want to do? Yes, we want to continue being at the entry level of agriculture, but we want also to go more into food processing and the other sectors that follow. The higher you go in that chain, the more you will be able to draw. So I think now it is lower because the people that we are drawing is many people employed in agriculture. It's really still people that are earning low salaries. It's either grade 8, grade 10, people without qualification, and not also more like that, the people that are doing it for subsistence farming and so forth. So we need now to go to where are the more complex skills that are required in agriculture. And I'm so sure that you will find more than I will do in that regard. So I think that is really the GDP. Procurement, I think government has had good intention when it comes to procurement and MSMEs. Around about 2015, the Minister of Finance issued a document for certain things that should only be procured locally. And recently, I know that the ministry is consulting on a document they call it the Code of Good Practice. And that is really targeting how can government procure locally and also how can they procure from MSMEs. So yes, those are some of the things that we want to work with government, and we have had a discussion with government of saying, how can we almost, instead of going on a procurement one by one, because that one, if I have a order today and I don't think I'll have an order tomorrow, it becomes very, very difficult for me to set up a business. And therefore, it's almost like, how can you get a production request that can give you a more basis in respect of which you can set up production. So that is a discussion that is ongoing, but I think what government believes they have done to support the industry and MSMEs is really to come up with the whole support of saying, if you want to buy something below this level, then you can only buy it locally, and they will even give a preferential support in terms of pricing. What can we do and how will we do to access those ones? It's a few things. We believe that yes, there's many ministries and many offices and agencies that do not comply with that. So now we need to find out how can government make sure that the procurement plans, policies, and implementation of everybody is actually supporting the policies that government has put in place. So the Procurement Act, maybe what I'm trying to do is, the problem is not with the Procurement Act. It's probably the implementation. And the more I look at the Procurement Act, the more I realize there is a lot to do with implementation, whether it is our understanding, whether it is our willingness to implement it, that sometimes is standing in the way of what we can do. But definitely, government has put in place things that should help, but we need to have a good discussion and say, how can we take, we can seize those opportunities that are given. And yes, as NIPDB, our MSME division is looking into how we can work with the Ministry of Finance to make sure that that is implemented. So looking at the other areas from the special economic zone, yes, we are engaged with the Ministry of Industrialization, and we have now included in the process of driving that. I must acknowledge that when we got here or where we are now, there's quite a big, let's put a gap in terms of policy. So there's a gap because number one, we get foreign investment acts that is from 1992, then it was replaced with the Act of 2016, and the Act of 2016 actually did not come into effect because of challenges, and now private sector. How can we make sure that between the two companies, there is more jobs that are created, there is more dollars that are kept in Namibia, and how can we support the players in that industry? And then when we talk about the unemployed graduates, again, I think, of course, there's a Ministry of Labor and Employment Creation. So while we enable employment, the NIPDB is not there for employment creation, but we want to make sure that our drive for activities will result in employment creation. So we will not engage people and say, how do we give you more jobs? What we do is, how do we bring more investors in Namibia? And when we evaluate those investments, we will look at it and say, one of the top kind of criteria is how many jobs will you create? And the next one is what level of jobs? How much of that will go, for example, to low-income earners and to other people that will be uplifted? That is the assessment that we look at. But for us to come up with a strategy on saying, how do we have a strategy that will deal with specific unemployment group? I think that one is out of our mandate, but definitely something that. So it is good to know and to track figures that are there. And the other thing that we want to do, and maybe I will ask these unemployed Namibians. So we get asked by Home Affairs, please help us review this business who wants to bring in non-Namibians and find out whether we must give them visas or not. Now, one of the things that I need to do is, have they checked that there is no such a person on the Namibia Employment Services Bureau? So let me ask you a first question. Are you registered on that database? Okay, most of your people registered there. Okay, so that is very good news to hear, because today, just this morning, I was talking about with colleagues, and we need to strengthen that database so that we can make sure that unemployed Namibians are on that database. And if somebody comes to us and says, I want to bring in 10 non-Namibians for this ABCD, then I'll be able to go to that system and say, no, but there is Namibians that they've got qualification. Because yes, we need to bring in very high skills. We want to make sure that no Namibians come in, but we want to make sure that those skills are the ones that will bring in revenue. And for example, if we bring in an economist, it's important to bring in a qualified, well-experienced economist, because that person will actually create probably even jobs for other economists that can go under training and who have not yet gotten experience. But if it's an economist who has got 1 year experience but we've got others, then that is probably something that you say. But again, I normally say, unless something is missing, there's not a non-Namibian who will just want to employ somebody from outside Namibia for the sake of it. So yes, while we will not sit down and crack our head as to how do we solve the employment of the resilient group, we believe that there is a ministry that is responsible for that. We will crack our head and say, what investment opportunities can we bring to Namibia that will solve the plight of many unemployed Namibians and based on the sectors in which they are. So we will not have a direct engagement with you, but we will have a direct, we will have work that will directly impact that employment level. And then availability. I think that is a very, very simple question. We have got 24 hours in a day, and God has given us 168 hours in a year. Unfortunately, there's only so much you can do in that 168, and one day I will be held accountable as to what I did with that 168. So normally I count it. I'm an auditor. I've been completing a timesheet for my life, 25 years, 24 years up to the end of last year. I was completing my timesheet. And when I complete my timesheets, many times it's a paid client who did I meet and they must pay my salary. So 40 hours was accounted. Normally I ask everybody else, if you've got 168 hours per week and 40 hours is on my timesheet, what were you doing with 128? So if you are telling me I must go and just make it available, it's almost like how many of us just get your money and you just make it available? You don't just do that. You make a budget, you plan, and you ask yourself, I have got $100. Of these $100, what are my needs right now? If I buy a car, how will it meet my need? And how much will I give away, and to whom will I give it away? So you have given a challenge, and the challenge includes time, and you have to be accountable for that time. And with that accountability, you need to be deliberate about how you spend that time. So if you want to ask me an opinion, it's very, very difficult for one person to answer for many people because you don't know what is in the head of other people. But I really believe. So let's start. I'm sitting here today. In 2019, at the beginning of the year, His Excellency the President appointed me and many other people on the high level panel on the Namibian economy. I think I'm sitting here today because of one of the results of the high level panel on the Namibian economy. So did the President agree and hear our advice? I think he did. Up to today, I see many things that is referred to cabinet and says, do this one in line with the high level panel recommendation. And I've started meetings where they have been giving the high level recommendation recommended ABCD, and we do that. So I do believe that if you want to say in general, the government, I think they listen. Specific on case by case, I cannot go. But where I've been involved, like in that case, I've given advice and I think it has been listened to. Will everything be listened to? No. Will everything be practical in terms of implementation? No. But I think there is willingness to listen, and I think that's why the ask is there. So when will you drop policies? I think again it will depend on that policy. So yes, we have got a policy lab as I have indicated, but there is a lot that is happening. So we will start communicating, especially from our side, and which policy we are working on. But there is really a lot that we are doing. So if you can help me, you can drop me an email so that you can tell me some specific policies that we suggest should be reviewed or looked at, and we will definitely consider that. So what we have done, for example, in our office, we have got two people who are responsible for policy. So general policy environment, we have got a manager that is responsible for general policy reform, and then we have got a manager that is looking after MSME policy. So those people is really for them, we say that they will each, they were employed again, some of them were just employed in September. And their mandate is create a committee that will look at the policy. So you get policies from all Namibians, because the only way we understand which policies impact business is when these people that are in business tell us. So we have heard, okay, NIR is a challenge. NIPA is a challenge. That is a challenge. They are on our radar, and actually like on our radar, busy working. So the moment you tell us this is a challenge, we look at it, how many people are invited, and again, in accordance with priority, we will be able to address that. So I think that there's a lot of activity that is happening there, but please get in contact with us. Long story, short questions. Thank you.
The responses are welcome. You can see everybody's been listening attentively. I saw two hands here before I close off. Are those two hands still in a position to ask the questions, or are we closing the session? Okay. I'll have your question. I'll have one more hand before I close off the Q&A.
Question, okay, two questions. One is, what if China investment plan to Namibia, long-term plan for China investing in this country? There's 10 years. Another thing is that the language that you're speaking, we are going to get investors, likely that they are coming from elsewhere. They are not mentioning possible investors that are Namibian or local investors. We are going to leverage them, given the competition, industry like retail and so on, who are the possible local investors that we are targeting. And the last, okay, what are the priorities of those investments? What are the sectors going to look at in terms of the priorities?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
What's the one? The France here one?
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Franz. I like your presentation. My question is anchored around sustained inequality that we have. When I listen to you, your diagnosis of the problem in relation to whether you are educated or not. And I think, given the position you occupy, if I don't question this, you extract what you mean, I might not understood you. I want to understand what you mean, because if we narrow this issue to such a single answer, we are doing disservice to this question of inequality that we have in the country. I think we need to broaden the scope that contributes to the state of inequality in Namibia. So I want to understand what you exactly mean with that point. And I think the other one, if you are on record as far as investment is concerned, I also want to understand the nature of investment in the modernity. Because for me, the idea of going to Dubai, the idea of going to DC to attract investors, it has a time frame. Perhaps 15 years, 20 years, that when that measure still effective in the 21st century, that idea of we are going to attract investors, I think we need to think something about that. I'm not discouraging the approach or the intention, but it's just the intent of focusing per se in that way. I think maybe let me just leave it there.
No, don't leave it there. Please help me explain a bit better. Maybe the alternatives that you're thinking.
How okay, we are honestly need to embrace the era we are living now. This is the best era to be alive. And if you don't see it that way, you don't see the solution that you are presented with. And this is why, for me, I feel like In your presentation, you made an example like PwC, America would say you can work wherever you are. Why are they saying that? Because of the flexibility of the economy that we have. You can do everything wherever you are. So I feel like it does not, you don't need to attract per se. You need to strengthen the capacity that you have. So it's a point that I have not fully formulated, but the idea is something in that line. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Franz. And then we'll close the Q&A session on that note. Responses?
Thank you. Can you still have the presentation?
I think we should still have the presentation. Yeah, it's there.
Okay. So if you can do the presentation, just go to one graph there that has got employed Namibian statistics while I look at the other questions. So long-term plan of China investment in Namibia. Unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that question. I have not really met with China to ask them what is their long-term investment for Namibia. So let me rather not make comments on that question. But of course, I think what one reads in general is that definitely China has prioritized Africa as an area of investment. And yes, we know that China, just like any other large economy, they're looking for minerals and so forth. And where there's opportunities, I'm sure that they would like to invest in those industries. But what are their plans for Namibia? I will not be able to answer. Local investors. So sorry again if my presentation is putting emphasis on foreign investors, because definitely we are attracting both local and foreign investors. So what we do is, I believe that both local and foreign investors have got a role to play. So why do you need a local investor? If you look on that form, on that graph that I given you on the economy, the more money you keep in the country, the more you have for GDP. So any country would want, of course, to keep your money in the country to the extent possible. Of course, limit import and export, limit export, and of course, even if you also limit dividends and interest and loan repayment. So you want investments that will stay in your country. So if we have everything, the best that we can do is let Namibians do everything for themselves. But unfortunately, that does not work. It does not work like that. So why do we want our investors? Because it's that will tell you we want to take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So let's talk about, we want to do car manufacturing. Can I just go to Namibians and say Namibians manufacture a car? We don't have the know-how. So I need to go to somebody who has got the know-how to manufacture a car. And somebody, because if they now want to say, okay, fine, I will manufacture in Namibia, I cannot give them a market either. They need to have their own market of where they are going to sell. So the foreign investor will come with the know-how, they will come with the market. If I can now have a good blend of a foreign and local investor, then I think that will be the perfect match. So every one of them have got an advantage and disadvantage, and you play with what you have just to make sure that you have got a good blend in your economy of one that will make sure that you retain your money locally, but also you are able to bring in the know-how, the skills that you do not have, as well as the market access. And I think that is one thing, especially we as Namibians need to consider, because we think we have got everything sometimes. Yes, we do, but there is really a lot that we do not have. Like right now, we cannot do vehicles because we don't have the taxes. That's just one example. So, looking at the priority sectors, I think I listed some of the priority sectors that we got from the diversification strategy. So the food and agri-processing is a priority sector. Basic chemicals and so on is a priority sector. Mining and adjacent industries are priority sector. Logistics and transport is a priority sector. And then services is a priority sector. And then renewable energy, where we also have green hydrogen, are priority sectors. So we've got about 7 or 8, which of course the tourism is one that we are currently busy driving. And the other day we were on NBC on Top of the Nation talking about the diversification strategy in which the priority sectors are covered. So that is that section. But then again, there's many sectors that are not listed there. It does not mean we don't want those sectors. It just means from our side when we are driving, these are the ones that we are going to prioritize because it's important. The one saying placing value on education. Please don't quote me, look at the data. So let me have a look. I'm just using the data. So this is data obtained from the Namibia Statistic Agency. If you have got a postgraduate degree in Namibia, currently you earn on average per month $1,800. If you have got no qualification, on average you earn less than about $100. And that is the statistic. So statistic from Namibia Statistic Agency says if you have got a university degree, postgraduate is there, degree only is there. If you have completed 1 to 2 years of degree is there. So it is not my statement at all. That is data from the Namibia Statistic Agency. So I would just like to, and it's not about saying which one is more important. No, it says which one does the market value. The people that are paying salaries, which ones will they pay more salaries for? Currently, that is the indication. So I would not like to kind of say, no, we place value on educated people are not important. There's nothing about who is more important. We are all human beings that breathe air that can catch COVID, and we are all definitely very, very important. But in terms of labor, the importance of labor sometimes says something else. So approach to attracting investors. I get your point, 100%, of saying actually you will want to do everything virtual. But if you look at the statistic agent again, FDI throughout the globe during COVID has significantly gone down. So with all our engagement that we've had with virtual engagements, there has been a significant decrease. Almost even Africa, I think we have gone down by about 16 or so percentage in terms of attracting FDI. And right now, people are going to face to face. So there is still something that's saying maybe the best deal happens face to face, and maybe one day we will get to a place where we will be able to attract investment by making costs. But at this stage, the statistic has shown that again, you need the investors to come on site, and sometimes the investors will trust you when they see your face than when they hear you talk over the phone. Unfortunately, that is where we are at this stage. And that's why we are attracting investors by still engaging with them and trying to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.